Now, I have some questions myself. I'm going to open it up to the floor a bit later. I was going to ask my questions on my mobile device, but the screen is a bit small. So I've decided I'm going to use a clipboard. And sorry for not being progressive enough, but I've got... I'm going to start by just sort of some general questions about mobile research. Now, last decade, a lot was talked about the representativeness of online research. And I think those arguments have, or those questions have been answered and the arguments have been addressed. I'd like to start by asking about the representativeness of mobile research. I mean, there are still issues about online research in emerging markets, and there are arguments that mobile research is actually more representative of consumers within Asia. So maybe, Guy, could I ask you to comment?
Sure. So, is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, there's lots of different angles to that. So let's start with, if you look at, okay, let's just take a country like India, for example. A lot of traditional research had in the past been done there face-to-face with a lot of focus on urban areas rather than, let's say, rural areas because of the limitations of getting interviewers into those places. And if you look at the penetration of smartphones in urban areas, it's actually very high. The figures in India for penetration of smartphones only reduce when you start looking at the rural areas. Okay, so point number one is actually mobiles and smartphones can be as representative as research that's been done in the past. Mm-hmm. Then the next factor is to start thinking about where we're going in the future. So it's only a matter of time that those figures are all growing so fast. And now's the time for us to be getting the infrastructure and to be getting the methodologies in place. And tomorrow it is going to be that this question or this discussion, I suppose, won't be happening because it will be representative.
Okay. Now, Alistair, I understand that in some emerging markets like Indonesia, on-device is now starting to do some brand tracking work. Is that correct? And can you tell me perhaps what were the things you had to overcome or the client had to overcome from moving from traditional data collection onto mobile?
So I won't talk too much about that because I'll kind of give away my presentation after the break, and I wouldn't want to take the kind of spotlight away from that. But kind of running along with the theme of investment and in representative data, there is a reason why venture capitalists have put money into our company because people really realise that this is a huge opportunity. If you look into our panels in Indonesia, 80% of the people on that panel don't have a computer. And so because of that, we can get through to the previously unconnected. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about these two kind of mega trends that are happening, one that there's an amazing amount of people, millions and billions of people who are becoming kind of the consumer class in many of the emerging markets. There's real spending power happening there. And then you've got this other trend of everybody becoming connected. There is a fantastic opportunity for everybody in this room to really capitalize on that and one for our clients to make money from them, but also for them to make much better and faster decisions based on the speed at which we can collect that data.
Okay. Elena, can you perhaps tell me a bit more about the research that Jobstreet is doing and maybe where mobile is playing a role here?
Okay. I would like to answer the question, like just now you asked which one is more representative. I guess we need to go back to the methodology used to collect the data. The minimum sample size out of the total online population or even the mobile population, the level of confidence, margin of errors. These are the very important factors to determine whether the research or the panel data can be used for us to conduct a better research or get a really good insight. So that's how Jobstreet we use the either online research or mobile research to help us to make the decisions. For Jobstreet, mobile research is definitely a very new area for us, but since last year we have started develop some of the mobile apps to get feedbacks from the candidates, because there are some questions candidates still do not feel comfortable sharing with us, especially through websites or even the social media. And I believe that mobile apps would be able to help us to get more feedback from them question related to salary, the expected salary, and the position title, locations, and even the type of companies which influence them to make the decision either to apply for jobs or to accept the job offers.
Okay.
Thank you.
One thing I talked about, I talked about the changes in research 10 years ago, and the big changes that are happening this decade. Now, some will argue that some things don't change, and that is the 20 to 25 minute survey that clients want. And that's still the issue today, that clients will want to put as much into a survey as they can. And yet mobile is, usually for 5-10 minute surveys. So can you tell me a little bit how clients, maybe Elena, you could tell me how clients can be convinced to undertake a lot of shorter surveys, but more of them across the year. And is that, in your organisation, is it still the case that the clients want to put as much in as they can, or are they being disciplined now into doing shorter surveys?
I guess, for example, our case candidates, they definitely prefer shorter surveys, and they definitely, not. If we look at the online survey, if we blast out the email to 50,000 of our user base, and we would end up getting less than 1,500 reply, which is very, very low response rate. So for us now, is to be able to, segmentize by different user group and send them different but very important questions. So we don't want to send a general survey and to all the user group, but to be able to identify what are the, the missing insights we have, and to be able to get them to feedback to us.
Okay. Guy, could you tell me whether you're still having to, as an organisation, having to educate clients, maybe not so much the market research managers, but their internal clients, to do shorter surveys? And is the industry making progress there?
Okay, so I find this actually quite an interesting area, and I maybe might say something controversial. Firstly, yes, there is a huge amount of work happening at the moment in terms of educating clients on new ways that you can get the same information and insight, but asking it in less questions or in shorter ways. But also I want to say that we've not necessarily seen any evidence to say that surveys have to be shorter. It's all about relevance and asking the right questions at the right time. So, for example, if somebody is actually at home and they're on their device, they're probably quite happy to give up 20, 25 minutes of their time. But if they are travelling on their way to work, or they're out and about somewhere, then they're only going to give 5 minutes of their time. So it's all about engaging in the right way, at the right time, and being relevant. And that's the way in which we need to design our interactions with consumers. So it isn't about all surveys do have to be shorter. It's just about being more intelligent in the way that we deploy them.
All right. Alistair, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, this is a fascinating subject to me, and is one of the kind of the most amazing kind of mysteries of life, really. That we're all in this room because we get paid well to understand consumer behaviour. That's our job. Yet so many people can't grasp the concept that the average person doesn't want to give 40 minutes of their time to answer a survey. It's amazing. And so, we battle this every day, and it's the biggest hindrance to the growth of our business. And so we work hard on it, and we're going to talk later about how we're chunking surveys and things like that to be able to collect a larger amount of data to make this happen. But Piers gave us these questions before last week or so, and so what I thought I would do the crazy thing of asking people in Malaysia how long they would be prepared to answer a survey for. And so would you know how many people in Malaysia are prepared to give 40 minutes of their time? For 3 ringgit this is, so this is an incentive of about 50p. Does anyone know how many people will give 40 minutes of their time? 2% of people will give 40 minutes time. If you put that down to 20 minutes, how many people would do it? You have 11% of the population will give 20 minutes of their time for it. If you want to gain data from a representative audience of people, we really believe that it has to be in a convenient way for consumers. And so actually when you look at this and you propose it to people in a different way, and you say, would you be prepared to give 10 minutes of your time one day, and then 10 minutes of your time the next day to answer surveys, then 60% of people say that they're prepared to do it. And so really, I mean, I think as an industry, we really need to think about, are we doing a good service to our clients if we're trying to ask the average person to give 40 minutes of their time? Would you do that? Would your friends do that? Would your family do that? I think the answer is generally no.
We'll come on to a new area, which, well, I mean, addressing perhaps what's the main question is big data and analytics, where corporations are really investing. I think we still most accept that the bedrock of the industry is still traditional Q&A surveys. What do you think the future will hold? Are we still going to be asking traditional question and answer surveys, albeit through new devices? Guy, would you like to?
Okay, so from the presentation we saw this morning from Melissa and Amy at Singletel, so that just gives examples of actually how you're able to get a huge amount of information about people's behaviours from behavioural type of data. But I think even Amy herself said that the challenge is to understand why those behaviours happen. So I believe that market research, the Q&A element, is going to be all about answering the why, and we're going to start using the behavioural data to understand the how, when, what. And I'm really excited by where our industry is going at the moment, and to see so many areas that are beginning to influence this change. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of the presentations over today and tomorrow on that aspect. I would say that the heaviest investments, and certainly from a Kantar perspective, in the mobile space, the heaviest investments have certainly been in the behavioural data side.
Right. Elena, are you using behavioural data and then using primary data to answer the why?
Okay. For our case, right, because I do believe that it's a combination of different type of survey, including the traditional survey, the online survey, and also the with the help of the internal tracking and analytics. Just take the example, if we want to get the very high response rate, really understand why our candidates do not perform certain action. Let's say our KPI is to get more applicants, then if we can link it to the user behavior to understand why we have highest job for the senior executive, but not many of them apply for jobs, and we look into all the key actions they have taken, whether they have logged in or have they completed their resume, then from that point onwards, we can really target those candidates who have not completed their resume. And because that would affect them to apply for a job. That's how we want to be able to use online survey and all the analytics and also the tracking tools to help us to conduct the survey.
I think also you stated that through online mobile research, people are more honest, perhaps, in the why, as opposed to if you're asking them in an interview. Have you got a view on that?
Yeah, I guess that the design of the mobile survey, which give them a really simple way to answer the question, because they do not need to go through so many questions, and they can just slide the bar and they can answer in a more convenient way, and that would help them to at least they don't mind to continue to answer more questions, and they can do it anytime. Maybe daytime when they receive the email, they don't have time to answer our question, but mobile, they can do it during their lunchtime, afterwards. So that helps to definitely get better response.
Okay, Alistair, any thoughts on the future of the traditional Q&A questionnaire, even if it's going to be done through mobile devices?
I mean, about 7 years ago, I worked at a company which was, I think, the first company to gain the back-end mobile operator data around how people are using the mobile internet. And we were set a task by, they were called T-Mobile at the time, to really understand their consumers and what they were doing on the mobile internet. We had an awful lot of people who were very good data scientists who were taking terabytes of data from this network. It took us months and months and months, and we found out that Facebook was what people were doing on their phones. which was amazing. And we could have taken 2 days and done a survey to do that. And so that was fantastic, but that's kind of a very facetious way of looking at it. What we actually really found out from it was that 50% of people's time spent on the mobile internet was on Facebook. And so the top line question we could have easily found out through a survey. The bottom line, real depth of the data, there's no way we could have been able to find out that out through a survey. And so really there are the kind of 2 aspects of it. It depends on the amount of investment that you've got to be able to answer that business question. And big data and the analytics that you can do around it can answer some amazing questions which are incredibly important to people. However, you don't always have $100,000 to answer that business question. And so if you have $5,000, then probably the survey is the quickest and the easiest way to do that. Whereas if it's a much bigger business problem, then perhaps the big data will be the solution to it.
My question is we'll touch upon, Piers, what you talked about, the honesty aspect, and we heard it yesterday as well from some panel providers where, what I would like to understand is, between online and mobile, have you seen, or are there any ways where you could actually check the quality of the data, and any experience that you could share? We've heard about honesty detection mechanisms now in place. And especially when you're looking at the survey length and the context changing with people using mobiles and multitasking, how much of it does it impact on the quality of the data? That's first. And the second one is incentivized versus non-incentivized respondents. What is your experience with mobile on these 2 aspects?
As market researchers, one of our mantras has been that a consumer should never be out of pocket for participating in research. So a lot of the incentives that we were giving in early days of mobile research was merely to cover their out of pocket. So we didn't want them to be incurring a data charge or a text message charge and so on. Then aside of that, of course, there's always, if you're wanting to reach a certain demographic of people in a certain time frame, then an incentive to take part, whether that's a prize draw or whether that's something on an individual basis, helps with the speed and time of turning things around. But one thing I will say, though, is a lot of our research has shown that actually the value of the incentive doesn't necessarily change the participation. So a higher incentive doesn't proportionally increase your response rates from a low incentive. And so that's the part about incentives. On a data quality perspective, I would say that firstly, I recognise that that's not my area of expertise, but my point of view is I think that there's still a lot of work to be done in that area to really fully understand. I've seen reports that have suggested both ways, that there are times where mobile really gets into a lot more honest moments, but I think because mobile is still being adopted in many new places, that there's a lot to be really learnt there. What I do think, though, is that mobile is allowing us to reach into groups of people that have previously been unheard or under-researched and underserved. So I know that we've done some research in Saudi Arabia where we've used mobile as a way of interviewing females, and that has previously been a real struggle. So there actually probably isn't anything to compare the honesty of those responses to. It's just fantastic that we're now able to reach them. So I think there's a lot more to be done in that area.
Yeah, there's lots of tests that you can do in surveys to make sure that the data is good and is honest, and then you can always clean that out at the back end, or we're moving now to being able to kind of automatically clean that data. For example, you can put in trap questions where you can understand if somebody's really paying attention, and you have the standard tests that you would do online as well, which is interesting. In China the other day, we asked a survey for the mobile industry, and one of the questions was about what device do you have. Because we automatically detect what device they have, we found out that something like 40% of people said that they had an iPhone, when in effect, when we analysed that, about half of them didn't have an iPhone. And that brings up funny things, because actually they might actually think they've got an iPhone, but it's got Android inside, or the whole mystery of stuff that's going on in China, which is very confusing. But that's one way in which you can do that test. But overall, the thing which has the biggest effect on data quality on surveys is the quality of that survey. and it's amazing. We've been doing this for about 4 years now, and we've developed best practices by basically analysing all of the data on a continuous basis, and you can almost improve that best practice in real time by analysing that data and seeing how it improves with different things. But where we've really fallen down on is when our clients have insisted on doing a survey which is incredibly long, or a survey which has is very boring, basically, or has very complicated ways of answering questions. And that is the biggest factor overall.
Online and mobile research, they talk about it democratising the research industry, meaning that clients can do more research themselves, not having to go to research agencies. Is Jobstreet now doing more of their own research in-house?
Definitely.
And do you still need agencies?
I guess we still need agency for sure. Because we still run the Nielsen research, every year for almost all the country, because that could not be replaced by other type of research. And no matter the size, whether it's a big research company or small, we may need them at different stages. So we have Nielsen survey, which will tell us what the candidates think about us, how they behave, and we end up getting the result, from Nielsen telling us that candidate would search for jobs using Google. So we would conduct some tests to try out. We would optimize search engines, and when we validate with our result from Google Analytics, it actually show a different story. It showed that they actually come to our site through direct traffic. So that's how research started, and then we run the test and to validate, and we match with our, the final result we get from our tracking and also the databases. And that would help us to understand some of the, especially the question you cannot ask them through online way. You have to ask them face-to-face, more in-depth interview. And some question which can be asked, using online form or using email, then we will ask a different question. And comes to mobile, and we still would reserve a mobile app to ask some of the more specific question, for example, salary related. So that's how we use the different agency or different way to conduct surveys.
Guy, insourcing of research is a trend. There's more of it. Technology is letting clients do that. Have you observed this happening, and is it affecting Kantar businesses in any way?
Okay, so a lot of interesting points in there, really. So firstly, it's healthy that we've got so much competition happening in our industry. It's helping us to innovate. It's pushing the whole area forward. Also, the fact that our industry has drawn the attention from players like Google, Facebook, Twitter, all wanting to monetize research solutions is pretty impressive, really, and exciting for us. And of course, but all of this does come with challenges. But I think there's a need for the big agencies to, of course, they're going to remain relevant, but their business models do change accordingly. And where I see big opportunities are, for example, when you've got businesses like, okay, I'm just going to take, for example, like Mill Brown, where the core of their products are built around normative data. So if you want to be able to compare the results of your brand with a competitor brand or with the marketplace, then normative data is incredibly valuable, and a lot of insourcing is great for getting insights into your own business and your own brand, but just getting that broader context. So that's just one example.
Alistair, we again talking about democratising the research industry. Online and mobile research is providing the infrastructure for regional data collection, meaning small agencies that haven't had the infrastructure are now capable of doing regional studies in the same way as the big agencies. Are you doing a lot of work with the boutique agencies and providing them the infrastructure that they don't otherwise have at a regional level?
Yeah, very much. Small and medium-sized market research are, in terms of the volume of our clients, are the largest source of clients for us. Working with kind of medium-sized people like 2CV or Brain Juicer or people like that, and we can really help them to be able to do mobile research without them having to have the need to make the large investments that people like Kantar are able to do. But kind of going back to your first point, I think it's really interesting when you look into kind of the self-service businesses that are out there and how that's happening and kind of democratising research. There's a really interesting venture capitalist guy called Fred Wilson. I'm not sure if anybody else follows him, but he invests in people like Twitter and Foursquare and Zynga and all of these sorts of people. And he gave a talk recently about unbundling. And unbundling is this kind of like mega trend that's happening throughout tons and tons of industries. And so if you look into the kind of the travel industry, the reason why you can book AirAsia now is because the internet gives this kind of freedom of information, whereas before you used to go to your travel agent on the corner, and that kind of industry has all been disrupted as a result of it. The internet means that basically we can all have like a freedom of information, and that information can flow around. And so previously you go to your market research agency because those are the people who know about it, whereas now you can go online and go to SurveyMonkey because it's just there and it's easy for you to be able to use. And so it's really kind of working with that trend, which I think is going to be very competing to a lot of the people, including our business, over the future.
Mm-hmm. I mean, are you seeing any developments in the nature of the research being done through mobiles? I mean, different types of objectives being answered through mobile-based research, would you say? Are we trying to get at new insights? Perhaps, Guy, you can...
I think the use of mobile first started around it was easier to get certain types of information and faster. So probably the early days of mobile were very much around consumption diaries and understanding what people are doing when. And now we're starting to see the mobile as a platform mature and evolve into a capability that allows us to do much more. And we're still probably still learning, but I believe it's the behavioural data and what we've been hearing a lot about, and I'm sure we'll hear much more about, that's really game changing for us. So it's enabling us to do a lot faster. And it's enabling us to get into the moment of something happening, whether that be purchase or whether that be when someone is in contact with a brand.
I think maybe it was something that Elena mentioned is that you can ask more personal questions. If you've got somebody opting into a survey and is getting some kind of reward for that, and it's not a human voice asking questions, that maybe one can ask different types of questions, more personal questions, more the type of information that they may not be so willing to volunteer through traditional Q&A type of surveys. Is that something?
Potentially also you could be reaching and doing surveys with people who actually have literacy issues. Well, so doing a survey that's through the use of symbols and pictures and images. Right. Because you've got to remember that in a lot of the emerging markets where literacy is still an issue, that but yet majority of them own a phone and are comfortable using their phone. So it's in a way it's kind of crossing boundaries that with a personal interview was in the past difficult.
Right.
I think just kind of time will tell the different types of use cases which come out, but kind of a good customer base for us has been the out-of-home advertising companies, so the billboard poster people. What they used to do is they used to have somebody who used to stand next to that poster, and they used to ask somebody along the street, as like, have you seen that poster? And that's how they would gauge the ad effectiveness of that. As a kind of facetious way of looking at it again. But that's actually what the guy told me he used to do. And so now what we can do with mobile is we can get people to use their phones to check in each time that they see these posters. And because of the real-time nature of this, what we've been able to do now is create dashboards which are integrated with Google Maps, and they supply them to their customers. So these are the buyers of those outdoor advertising posters. And so what the media planner does now is he sits there and in real time sees people actually seeing those seeing those posters and being able to give their instant reaction to it. What this does is it gives them some sort of reassurance that actually the posters that they've bought have actually been put up, and they can see that instant reaction to it, and now they can start to actually optimize those campaigns because they can do digital advertising and understand which ones of those posters are actually having the best effect on consumer opinions. And this wasn't been possible before, and so it really kind of helps to speed up that process for that sort of advertising industry.
Just had a question perhaps for Guy and Alistair, and then one for Elena as well. What are firstly the client demands that you're hearing, for cross-device behavioural insights? So just interested to get some perspective on that, and then perhaps for Elena, given your position at Jobstreet, what are the sorts of problems that you're also looking to solve, through that need for cross-device measurement and behaviour?
If you understand how the web analytics tracking is, you understand that we so far couldn't track the cross-device performance accurately. We need to have a more specific tracking for that. So at this moment, Jobstreet, what we are doing right now is we have moved to an enterprise analytic, which help us to understand the behavior from the multiple platforms, not only the web-based, but tablets and also mobile, understand the daily browsing activities, so that we would be able to design or implement the right features in the right platform, because I don't believe that mobile can cater for all the different actions. Some actions candidates still prefer to take on website, and some action they prefer to use their mobile, and that's what we are moving towards right now, to understand the cross-device performance, to take into the consideration what candidates would like to perform using their mobile apps and what they do not wish to perform using their mobile apps.
There's quite a lot happening in there, and probably talk about that for quite a long time. But I'm going to break it into probably two areas. There's what are researchers asking for from mobile, and that's all about bringing them efficiencies in the way that they're collecting data, being able to extend their reach into reaching a broader demographic group of people. So it's all about operational efficiencies. But then from a client perspective, what are clients asking for? So there is a lot of pressure on collecting more data from a single source. And if I think about a lot of the ways that media management's done and cross-device usage, a lot of the media planning work that Alistair was just mentioning about, a lot of that has historically been done by fusing together different data sets. And what mobile is enabling us to do now, and a lot of the new technology that's coming along with mobile, is the ability to start collecting more single source data and really understand how all these behaviours fit together. So those are probably the two things I would sum up.
Our clients are really just mostly market research companies, and are really trying to speed up the decision process for their customers. And so speed really is the thing which we hear particularly in this region. And it's very difficult to make a decision on some research which has taken 6 weeks to collect, because that decision has passed quite often and people have moved on to the next thing. Whereas if we can start to reduce that to days or a week or something like that, then it enables things to become a lot quicker in terms of those decision making. In terms of brands that come to us, they're often, in many emerging markets, just operating in the dark at the moment, completely in the dark. So if you look at the way that TV measurement works in Kenya or in many African countries, the data comes out on a quarterly basis. And so if you're trying to plan your ad campaigns on TV on quarterly data, it's incredibly difficult. It's very difficult to optimize the work that you're doing, and so mobile gives that opportunity to make to make that decision-making process quicker.
Some of the challenges that Tim pointed out here, and an interesting discussion on how you guys see mobile versus online and how the landscape is. My question, I have a single question. Maybe Alistair or Guy, maybe you can respond to it. when it comes, we're talking about investments and not just investments from venture capitalist firms. Of course, there's a lot of interest in new technology. But when it comes to economies of scale in high growth markets, one of the challenges why clients are not getting on the bandwagon is twofold: technical limitations, or maybe not the self-awareness of what those technical limitations are, and the cost. Mobile still seems to be expensive when you consider face-to-face in most high-growth markets today. So what's your view? I mean, is it the lack of the number of players that exist in these markets to drive down the cost, or are there any other reasons?
Okay, that's a good question. It's a tough question. So first off to say, mobile is actually a lot more difficult than people realize, technically. With so many different types of devices, and infrastructure really varies from country to country. One of the things which clearly will bring down costs, of course, is the more widely it's adopted, the more people using it, then the cost of having a resource base gets more efficiently spread and recovered. And in some of these countries where you're seeing still today, we're still seeing a lot of these services setting up for the first time, it's new, and of course that's where your recoveries are highest. So appreciate that a lot of costs have been expensive to date in some of what we've seen happening. It's only going to go one way, and that's down. And the other thing I'd say as well is there is disruption, of course, from new players in the marketplace. So we've seen some new services coming into market, I would say, at quite high prices, which is challenging. And then, of course, we're seeing some new services coming into the market at quite a competitive costing. So I'll give you some examples of that. So I think that there are some new players trying to monetize behavioral data, and they believe that a lot of that data is worth a lot more than probably what is reality. And then from a survey point of view, such as Google consumer surveys, really challenging the marketplace and being very competitive. So all of this is helping us go in the right direction, but it's taken maybe what seems longer than we would all like for it to become established and for that to happen.
Just on the Google consumer surveys point of view, they're actually very good at marketing. They're not actually that cheap. They give a per question cost, and when you actually add that up, I've done this because I wanted to find out how much of a threat they were. Yeah, they're like the same cost as everyone else. And so it's just, if they say 10 cents a question or whatever it is, and then it just kind of multiples up from there. In terms of costs, it really is dependent on the market and dependent on what's out there. If you look at the average cost of a face-to-face interview in Malaysia, it's what, $20, something like that. And so actually mobile does provide decent cost savings. It's not dramatic, but it is decent cost savings to it. We don't sell on cost because that's not really where we think the value is. The value is in the speed and the data quality and so on. Whereas if you look in India, then if you look at the cost of a face-to-face interview, there's not much we can do there. I mean, it's unbelievably cheap, and so we're not going to sell on price. We're never going to win on price there. I don't have my own experience of doing face-to-face interviews in India, but from what I understand, there is issues sometimes with quality, there is issues with speed, there is issues with how nationally representative that is, and all of those things can be fixed by mobile. But cost is definitely not going to be the winner in India.
Elena, do you want to add something?
I guess it's the lack of talent and also lack of competition, and the market is dominated by some of the key players where they charge really expensive for the mobile apps development. So let's say we launch some of the new features, jobs near me, salary matching, and some of the features can only be done in the Android or iOS platform, but not for the BlackBerry platform. So these are some of the technical restrictions we face. And also the user base is skewed towards a younger group. So let's say we want to run a survey to target senior manager to get their feedback, and you can see that from the panelists, and most of them are at the younger group. So these are the...
Right, so the message is there is room for new players to kind of come in and help grow the market, and which is exciting in a way. Thanks so much to all of you for sharing your views.